Alrighty, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to get us started and then hand it over for our panel webinar today. So today we're going to be talking about using Brightspace for early learning. If you could go to the next slide, please, Anita. Thank you. So before we dive in, we're just going to go through some housekeeping items. So the first thing that I want to mention, if you could just click the slide, please, Anita. Thank you. So the Q&A is open for questions related to today's webinar. This is an open webinar for questions. We do have some guiding questions that we've gotten ahead of time, as well as some things that we've already heard about from our attendees today. So we do have a list of questions we're going to be going over first. Feel free to put any questions or follow-up questions into the Q&A. Any relevant links that need to be posted will be posted into the chat pod. Links cannot be shared into the Q&A, so if links are shared out, you can find them there. I will be monitoring the Q&A today, so I will get any follow-up questions along the way, and anything that we cannot address in the chat, I will address at the end. So if you do have a question, don't worry, it will get answered. And if you do have additional questions following today's session, or if you leave today and remember a question, please contact us at successcoach@d12.com. The recording and the slide deck from today's session will be available on the Teaching and Learning website, the one that you registered on. We'll also send a follow-up email. Since you attended today, you will get an email from us with the recording and the slide deck. So plenty of options. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just before we dive in, you might hear a couple different terms today. Some things you'll probably hear, both the word D2L and Brightspace. These words are used interchangeably often. So D2L is our company. Brightspace is the product. Brightspace is also extremely customizable. So many districts call it something different. You might be familiar with it being called a different word. So if you are confused about the language we're using, please just let us know. Just to put this into perspective as well, it's the same way that you might have a company like Apple and they make the MacBook. So we use those words that way. We also have our Brightspace community, which is a really great online community. It's a free resource for anyone who uses Brightspace. You can go on and create an account if you haven't done so already. There's a ton of great articles as well as guided training on there. So if we talk about some tools today that you're feeling like you'd like to take a little bit of a look at, you can go to our amazing guided training webinars on the community and check those out and get some help from our training team. Next slide, please, Anita. Thank you. So I will finish up my talking and hand it over to everyone that you want to hear from today. So Anita and I will be moderating today. As I said, I will be monitoring the chat. We also have Tracy and Melissa with us today. They are grade 1 and 2 teachers, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves. And we're so thankful to have you with us today. So Tracy and Melissa, I'll let you take it away and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Tracy Saylor. I am a first grade teacher in our Envision Charter School with first and second grade. I've been teaching for 9 years. I've taught 4K, kindergarten, and first grade.
Hi, my name is Melissa Riggs. I also teach here with Tracy. We're co-teachers in our first and second grade classroom in Envision Learning Center. I think this will be my 12th year teaching. Coming up, I have taught 4K, kindergarten, second grade, third grade, and then obviously co-teach right now in first and second grade.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to take over and we're going to talk a little bit about your experience using Brightspace in your classroom, co-teaching. We've got a lot of cool questions here today. So just to get started, what does your typical day look like? If you could describe it a little bit for us.
So our typical day, our kids eat breakfast in our classroom. So as you know, when kids come in kind of differently at different times and eat breakfast, some take longer, some don't. We have to have something for our kids to do. So a really great thing that we did is we actually utilized Brightspace right away. When they are done eating breakfast, they get their iPads. They get onto Brightspace and they do their handwriting. We do pre-recorded lessons that they just watch and they listen to us and they do that. Then when they're done with that, they have a math game that they play. We all kind of wrap up together and we do a morning meeting. We have our math lessons. We do sometimes use Brightspace for math. It's kind of like our worksheets. They go into Brightspace in our math little tab and get an activity to do out of there, or we link games that they could be practicing in. So we use Brightspace during math time. And then we have like our reading and our writing, and we also do projects. We are a project-based learning school also. And depending on our projects, we do use Brightspace to do a lot of our linking of websites or resources that we would like them to use during that time too. So
Okay,
that's
great.
basically our day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so setting yourself up with Brightspace, I'm sure especially with grade 1s and 2s can be challenging. So is there anything that you've done to really set yourself up and make sure that Brightspace in your classroom is going to be successful, especially with the early learners?
Yeah, definitely. The more explicit you can be when they're younger, the better off because they need to know every little step. So a couple of the things that we did to front load before the school year began was we actually would go in and impersonate each student, and we would set up all of their courses that we wanted to be pinned to the top so that the things that they would access, like math and reading and writing and phonics and projects, are going to be right up there when they come in. We also did color coding. So, you know, our math might be red, which color codes and goes along with their red folders that they have, or projects is green and goes along with their green folders. So the color coding has been a really nice piece for us as well. We also, of course, need to go through with our youngest students exactly what they need to do when they get on. So we walk through that right at the beginning of the school year. All the kids have their iPads out in front of them. We show them where they're going to click. They get in there. We show them what it's going to look like. We practice going through. We practice going back to the homepage. We practice getting into the different courses and clicking on the dashboard where you see the little green content button, because that's where they're going to get everything that they need. So really just practicing all of those things with the students really set us up well. Another thing that we do at the beginning of the year too is we have multiple different platforms that the students use for learning, and there's different passwords with each one of those. So we do have little laminated cards that we make for students, and we keep them on a little ring and they keep them in their cubbies. And one of the ones on there that we have is their Google password. And because Brightspace is set up with their email and their Google password, every once in a while it needs them to log back in. So they'll just go and they'll grab that, they'll add in the password, because our passwords are school set. So they're random numbers and letters, very hard to memorize those, so that they have everything that they need to be successful.
It's great. I love those tips. Okay. All right. So do you have any tips for co-teaching in an online environment? Because that can be a challenging teaching on your own, but what about co-teaching where you have that added layer?
Yeah, so for co-teaching, one of our biggest things that we realize is really having the same expectations. Doesn't matter, you know, what grade level they're in or what, everything is really the same. Even the same thing that we do with those expectations is, you know, everyone's going to have a mini lesson. Is a mini lesson different? Yes. They'll all have to do, we do iReady or math and reading. Like everyone really typically has the same thing. So it doesn't matter whenever they reach out to the teachers, any one of us could answer back because we expect the same thing and do the same things in our classroom. That's really the biggest part. We also ourselves just kind of communicate and make sure, you know, if there's something we do together as a project, we both split the work, kind of a thing. Even though there's things that we do separately, we just make sure we talk with each other and are always collaborating, and that really makes it work for us.
And that's kind of a theme I see a lot with early learning. Consistency is really key for these learners.
Yes, huge.
Okay, so we have some screenshots here. How do you handle teaching a split level class within Brightspace, and what tools do you use to assist with this?
Yeah, so as you can see by the screenshot here, our groups and managing groups was just a huge piece for us that we used this year. because Tracy and I both teach different or do mini lessons for different grade levels, she'll do the first grade mini lessons and I'll do the second grade mini lessons. We set up groups within math and within reading and within writing so that they can go right in there and then access the mini lesson that they need to watch for their grade level. The beautiful thing about that then is whatever group they're in, that's what's going to be visible to them. So they're not just going in math and seeing all the first grade stuff and all the second grade stuff. What group they're in, that's what is going to be visible so that they know that's what they need to do. And as we know with our youngest learners, the more you have on there, the more confused they get.
For
So
sure.
if you can tie them into a group, they only see what they need to see. And then there's flexibility with that too, because Tracy and I certainly work with all the students and we share them. So sometimes we might have first graders that need to go to a second grade mini lesson for something, or a second grader that needs to go to a first grade mini lesson, or we have other specialists that they might work with that they would need links or things for that. So the groups tab, or the groups, managing groups, really has been big for us, and I think has led to a lot of the success that we've seen with our students.
It's great. Awesome. And then within content, I can see here along the side, we've got the tabs and just organizing content with labels so that the students are able to see which piece of content to go to, whether it be first grade or second grade. Great. Okay, so what have been some of your successes, would you say? We've had a tough year, but there's always successes in these times. So what would you say?
We kind of feel that the biggest success that we have had is our kids learning how to be independent. Even though they're only first and second graders, when you really set up the expectations and the kids know that you can see what they can do or what they've been on and making them be accountable, they've really learned how to be independent. We've had so many kids where the parents have told us they don't have to worry about what it is that to be on top of them, because they know they go into Brightspace, they click on this, and then they watch this video, they do this little Nearpod math activity, and they know they go on to iReady. Just having all of that listed right there for them, the kids can take on that ownership, and then the parents don't need to be the ones reminding them what to do. And so that's been really nice. Is I guess too is just the feedback with the parents on that part has been a great thing. And then for us, we really get to learn on which kids, we call them powerful learners, who just take charge of their learning. It really then opens our eyes on who already has established that, and then who do we need to continue working on with that also, especially when we come back into the classroom at times, like who do we need to really remind them and teach them who's in charge of your learning. They are, how do you do that? Because those are big skills that we do teach in our classroom and all the time. Another big, I mean, it's part of that goes with that is we do Google Meets when we were virtual, and we had a really high percentage. There would maybe be one, maybe two kids that wouldn't show up on one of the days, but for most parts, we always had all the kids there. And so when they showed up for those daily Google Meets and reminded them of everything, again, the kids knew the accountability and our expectations, and we had pretty good success with that.
That's great. And I remember a few slides back, you had links for their Google Meets. I thought that was really great that each student had their own folder, and within that folder, you were able to put in their links for every meeting that they had that day. So again, setting themselves up for success and just allowing them to be independent that way. It's great. Okay, and moving on, how would you use the portfolio tool in Brightspace to engage with parents?
So we are a standards-based school, so all of our reporting is done based on the standards, and we have developed in our school what we call progressions. We use them for reading, for writing, for math, and basically they report out using Google Docs, things like that, what standards students are proficient or solid in, what ones they still need to work on and are developing in. And so when a parent goes in and logs in to their Brightspace account, they can click their child and then it goes right in, and in the portfolio tab is where they can find these documents. All of them are live documents. So if we, update something and say they're proficient, on their math progression or whatever it is, then it reflects right on that link whenever the parent opens it up. So that's really the biggest thing that we use the portfolio for.
Great. I like that use case. And this has been one of the biggest challenges I've heard from educators is you've got young learners and a lot of their learning is through play. So how do you engage young learners in an online environment?
So yeah, like one of the big things we did, I already kind of talked about, is we felt like that Google Meet right away in the morning is huge. And it was fun. They were excited to see everybody, they see all their friends. You would kind of play some kind of a game, would you rathers or mystery bag and clues, and things like that, just to kind of do like your morning circle like you normally would. And then you just kind of go through what the day looks like. You would do the reminders of who had meetings with a specialist that day, who had sight word practice with one of our paraprofessionals, just kind of really getting them their mindset on what their day would look like, because it would be different day to day based on which kid with what meetings. And then I feel like the biggest thing is adding those extra programs. So they watch your mini lessons, but we would use, like I said, Nearpod, which was an activity page, which kind of made their learning with their like worksheets more like a game, because they have like game interactive things in there, which you create all that yourself. So whatever topics you're teaching, you just create using Google Slides and importing them in and things. So you kind of have that kind of thing. We also, I know during reading time, so that we could listen to them read, which they absolutely loved. It's kind of doing a few different things, but we use Flipgrid and then taught them. And again, all of that stuff you have to teach. So your lesson for the day, before you move on for a lesson, your lesson is to teach them how to do Flipgrid. So you're teaching them how to do it, all the steps, and then their thing to do for the day is to go in and do it and just say what your favorite book is or something, just to get them going. And they all love listening to themselves and listening to their friends the next day, because that would be something else we would do, is make sure that they listen to their friends read and do that things. So really finding those interactive things that they would like to do, but it still encourages the academic parts. So
for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. I like how you start the day. It's a really great way to build your classroom connection, even though you're online. I love that. Okay, so how would you handle your classroom when one or both of you are away? Is there any tips you have?
Yeah, so we actually got a chance to experiment with this year. Tracy and I were both gone on separate days and did not have any subs actually, or we weren't planning on having any subs because staff shortage and sub shortage has been a real thing, as you all know. So the really great thing is that students already know how to use Brightspace. So Tracy and I would just pre-record our lessons, pop our math lesson in, leave a worksheet or do a Nearpod. If we had something for reading or writing, we would pop that in those folders and the kids would watch it. And then because our classroom routines and expectations were so established, they would just carry on with their day, just like we had just taught them a mini lesson, and then they would go about math workshop, and then we would do something for reading and they would go about their reading and reading workshop. So really setting all those things up at the beginning of the year paid off really well for us, because one of us was gone here or there and they just needed to watch those things, and we would kind of explain what we expected them to do for the day, or if they needed to turn in a worksheet or submit a Nearpod, and that was it. And everything functioned really well because they knew where everything was and they knew what the expectations were. So our day pretty much flowed the same way that it would if both of us were there.
That's great. All because of that setup. I think that's really important takeaway. Okay, so I know Tracy touched on this a little bit. What are some other resources or websites that you use in your Brightspace classroom? And how do you with Brightspace? So we've got a little screenshot from one of your lessons there.
So yeah, I feel like I kind of touched on a lot of these. Our biggest resources that we do use, well, actually the biggest resource we use is YouTube. So we videotape ourselves using Screencastify, and then we, have it on YouTube. And of course we only have it so that it's shared with our kiddos. We don't have them live out there.
Right.
But so we attach those YouTube under our lessons for the day. And because of being virtual, we do have like tons of pre-recorded videos for a lot of our units. So that's the one nice thing, like we were talking about when we were gone or absent. We actually have so much that's recorded. We could always grab one from a lesson from before, because you're teaching the same kind of a thing. So sometimes you didn't have to really even record anything. But besides YouTube, we talked about how we use Nearpod. That's our biggest one. And the reason why we use Nearpod is because the kids can write and draw on that. And then we can go ahead and after they're done and submitted, we can go and look at it and see how they did on that. Then the other thing that we use, like I said, was Flipgrid, especially in reading we did. Google Meets. So that for every day. And then for math, we started using some games from ABC Yeah. We use the website, but there's a lot more games if you get the app. So we plan on purchasing the app so we can instill it, because there's a lot of really good ones that focus, again, because we're standard based, that we can really hit the standards really well using ABC Yeah. And the other thing is for our projects, like I said, we just got done doing a big thing with habitats, and our big driving question was, can any animal live here in the state of Wisconsin? And they had to prove yes, why or why not. And so we had to preload again in our project folder different websites and things that kids could go on to watch animal videos or resources where they could read or do things. So again, we just use whatever's out there, but YouTube was a really big one for us for even projects.
Okay, great. And so now, thank you so much for all of that. That was really insightful, and I hope our participants really enjoyed that. So now we're going to open it up for questions. Bridget, did you get any questions that we should answer live or in the chat, in the Q&A?
Yeah, so there was one question that it was more of a clarification thing that Nita, if you don't mind, actually, I'll share my screen just for a second.
Sure.
So one of the things that Tracy and Melissa talked about was their color coding of their content, which is really great. And there's just some things with Brightspace that I want to clarify. So within the content tool, and again, I'm just in a demo course, it might look different than what everyone is used to. You can see the default here is the color coded, so it'll be multicolored. So you can see that Tracy and Melissa had the blue and the yellow. Those are different themes that you can set. So I would talk to your Brightspace administrator about that if that is something you're interested in having instead of the multicolor view. If you want a specific color, maybe you have a school color that's yellow, or you want to have, again, those different colors. You can set that based on themes, and I would talk to your Brightspace administrator about that. So Anita, again, I'll pass it back to you. I just wanted to clarify that one there.
Sure. And so we've got a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions for our early learning teachers.
Sorry, one question just came in. Rebecca's wondering, from your opinion, Melissa and Tracy, is the free version of Nearpod good, and does it fit the needs that you have?
So I don't know if we ever had the free version. I just know when we went virtual, our district was really wanting to make sure we had what we needed. And because we were one of the groups that did use Nearpod right away, they thought it was very beneficial and they just jumped in and purchased it. We're just waiting for Brightspace, honestly, to, create that in Brightspace that they can have the kids write on the documents or on the pages themselves. But I don't know if Nearpod's free version is something, it probably would be a great thing to start with and see, and then talk to your district, especially if you're going to be virtual again. It's worth it. It really is.
Great. I have a question here. Someone's wondering, what would you say were your biggest challenges throughout the year?
So I do feel like if you look at especially being virtual for challenges, since we have littles and they have to have be on like meets and things at a certain time, and they can't tell time.
Right.
That was one of the things that you did rely on the parents a lot. I don't know if teaching kids, like we were lucky enough to have kids be able to take iPads home. I don't know if teaching or even setting alarms on those iPads, I don't know if parents would be annoyed or what, but I feel like that could have been maybe something that would have helped some of our kids to get on when they have to rely on themselves. I mean, that we did have a lot of kids have to rely on themselves. The other part I feel like has been a big challenge, even though we do have the side for the parents to look at those portfolios and to see the progressions and how the kids are doing, because we do not send report cards home because it is live. I truly don't know how much those parents look at it. I do feel like they're putting a lot of faith into us without knowing if the kids, how they're doing academically in the classroom for our first year.
And just to paint a picture, your school year, I think you kind of were virtual for some time and then you were in class. So you've been able to show some experience from both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, our first year we were in person and then we left by March. And so we ended the year all virtual. And that was our big shocker of how do we get our kids. And again, if you don't see your kids, I mean, it was our first experience of, oh my gosh, we've never used Brightspace yet. And we went virtual. And so we literally taught the kids by just getting on a Google Meet and then recording ourselves on how to do it. And that's how we had to teach them to start with. And then it got better and better as we got going. And then we knew coming in how important it was them to use Brightspace because it was a platform. And then it just opened our eyes on how we could use it every day.
That's great.
Like we're loving the handwriting. I know it seems like it's little, but it just really, really works. We really want to see how we can keep using things more and more in the classroom. But we just knew then we had to right away teach the kids how to in case we went virtual. And then we did go virtual from Thanksgiving to after the new year. So
along with that, setting yourself up, setting them up at the beginning in order to make your school year flow better. And it sounds like you guys have had a really successful year. So I'm happy for you. Any other questions? Just pop them in the chat. Or sorry, I keep saying pop them in the chat. Pop them in the Q&A and we can definitely get to answering them in these last couple of minutes.
There was one that we can't answer fully because we can't show the full tool just based on student names, can't show that information. But if you could talk a little bit more about the portfolio tool and how you use that with the standards and maybe what kind of things you put into there and what that might look like.
Was the question kind of around what our progressions look like? Sort of?
Yeah, so
one in
the
the
question
Q&A? Okay.
was, how do you use portfolio for standards? So do you track that within there?
Yeah, so basically each child has their own Google Sheets, right? Or Doc, something like that. Yeah, and within it, like say they'll have a math one, all of the standards. We have a tab on the bottom for all the standards for kindergarten, all the standards for first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, so that the document actually travels with the student over the years. And basically, you know, if you are a kindergarten student, and we use something that are called SPPs, student proficiency profiles, they're sort of like a quick test or an exit ticket on just one standard. And if they become proficient on that, then we would go ahead and mark a little P next to that standard in this Google Doc. And then we actually have pie charts that it leads to. So when you look up on the top, if you happen to know math standards, and I don't know what they are like in Canada, I don't know how they compare to the United States, but for example, in the United States, we have like 4 or 5 big domains in math. So there's like measurement and data, geometry, algebraic thinking. And so once they get proficiency in all of those, then it fills up that pie chart. So it starts red and then it slowly fills up that pie chart for each one. So
Oh, great.
I don't know if that helps directly for the
Yeah.
question, but then we basically upload the live link to that then under each child's in the portfolio tool under each child so that the parents can go on and access it.
Yeah, that's great. So we are at time, so I will just provide the resources and then we will send everyone on their way. And I want to thank Tracy and Melissa so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and I hope that everyone found some great tips from their expertise today. So thank you so much, and I appreciate everyone joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.